Do you have a favorite living artist? Have you ever wondered what art he or she chooses to live with? The new book, Artists Living with Art, takes an intimate look at the personal art collections in the homes of some of the most famous artists today. Joining us now is author Stacey Georgen. Welcome, Stacey. This is such a fantastic idea for a book. How did it come to you?
Well, the idea really came from years ago. I was visiting Rachel Feinstein and John Curran in their Soho loft, and I noticed walking around with John and looking at the art that on one wall they had a late Picabia from a group of sketches that he did of pinup girls from 1942, and it was next to an old master drawing. And I thought to myself that it was fascinating that John owned these works. His practice, if you're familiar with it, he is a beautiful painter, and he paints in an old masterly technique, but he's painting erotic, almost pornographic in some cases, images. So the combination of those two works together kind of gave me new insight into John's work, and it was something that I thought about for a long time and started thinking that it would be very interesting to look at what artists collect and look at that in relation to their own work.
Absolutely, I agree. And looking through your book, it was so interesting to see the personal taste of these artists. I want to ask you now about Andres Serrano. Of course, his was sort of instantly recognizable, all the religious iconography. What did he tell you about his home?
Well, his home is very interesting. He lives in a white brick 70s building that he's totally transformed into almost a church-like space with plaster walls and relics from the 16th and 17th century, both religious but also just traditional pieces of furniture. And he lives with all of that work.
Amazing.
And so it's a really strange place to be, and you feel almost as if you're in one of his photographs, his photographs juxtapose these beautiful images with this very difficult type of iconography. And so you feel like you could hear a pin drop in his home.
Fascinating. And then, of course, Cindy Sherman, who we love for her power to transform herself in her work. What was her home like?
Well, Cindy's a prolific collector, and she's a collector of contemporary art, but also of voodoo dolls and ceramics and toys. But the one underlying theme, I would say, in Cindy's work is that she does tend to collect things that are figurative, but somehow masked or distorted. And so you find in her home that she'll have images by a Sergei Zarva, who is a Ukrainian artist, and they look like they could almost be her photographs. She also has, interestingly, a photograph made by the Comtesse de Castiglione, who was a woman in the late 18th century who commissioned a photographer to take over 400 images of herself dressed up as famous characters from the theater and literature, which is an extremely interesting thing to know that Cindy Sherman has.
Absolutely, because you can see the tie to her own theatricality and love of dressing up. Yeah. And then, of course, you visited Chuck Close's home. He is the famous photorealist artist. What does he live with?
Well, Chuck lives with really two distinct bodies of work. He has a large display of contemporary art, all figurative faces and visages, which he's laid out in 25-foot stacked shelves in his front hallway. But recently, in the last few years, he started collecting old master paintings. And again, they're all figurative, they're all of the face, very much like his own work, but they include busts and they include masks. And so it's very interesting. There's this line that connects them, and yet the works at face value are so very, very different.
Absolutely, and his fascination with portraiture can be seen there as well.
Well, and also Chuck has a disease that makes him unable to recognize people. He can't recognize people with their faces, and so that there's this sort of tie-in to his own practice, but then also to what he's drawn to.
Fascinating look inside the homes of our favorite artists. Stacey Georgen, thank you so much for that.